Hello there. Welcome to the Slice of Time Street Photography podcast, where I speak with other street photographers to learn more about their vision, ideas, routines, editing, and photography. In today's episode, I'm joined by Simon Ogden. We talk about how he goes out daily, how he loves nighttime photography, and how books make a difference for inspiration. Further, we also discuss doing photography with friends or alone. So, hi Simon, welcome to the podcast. Maybe it's nice for you to introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, Frederick. Thanks for inviting me on. Yeah, my name is Simon Ogden, and I'm a photographer based in Manchester in the UK. The vast majority of the work that I put out is of Manchester, and it was really the city of Manchester that was the original inspiration to pick up a camera. But having said that, I do tend to travel around a little bit now as well. And the work that I tend to do tends to be more nighttime rather than daytime.
Okay, great. Yeah, I noticed the nighttime aspect in your photography. That's also why I contacted you, because I find it really interesting, because it's not often the case. A lot of people are like
Yeah.
sun oriented, or I need to say it, like you have the silhouettes and all that kind of stuff, which is usually by the sun, but you take a different approach, which I like. So how did Manchester get you into photography then?
Well, photography came about really sort of by I no longer work, so I needed something really to substitute work. I tried many different things in around about a 12-month period, from going on pizza making courses to making chocolate to leathercraft, all sorts of different things. And then I remembered that when I was about 14, I actually had a camera. I bought the camera for, I think it was a Christmas present, and I never got to use the camera because I was intimidated by the settings of the camera, and nobody really was around to sort of guide me on how to use it. But I remember having the feeling that I really wanted to do it, but never actually got around to doing it, even though despite me having a camera. So on this journey of like finding what can I do, what can replace working life, and what would be a good hobby to pick up, I sort of remembered the camera and decided to buy a camera. I began with a Fuji 100X after doing a lot of research on the internet, because it was definitely the discipline of street photography that I wanted to do. So from there, I hopped into basically walking around the streets of my home city, which, like I said, is Manchester, and just started to take pictures, and they were mainly in black and white at the beginning. So that was the start, really. And then from there, I would say pretty much immediately picking up the camera. And of course, when I was 14, so I'm 56 now. When I was 14, I didn't have the fantastic thing that we have today, which is the internet and YouTube, to do all the research on camera settings and tips and tricks and advice, and also the amount of inspiration that I found from places like Instagram and other platforms. So very quickly I was able to sort of get to grips with the camera to a point where the camera was no longer I no longer felt intimidated by using camera settings in manual, and then really then my obsession with street photography just began.
Okay, great. And like, how fast did it feel comfortable for you to hold you said like you weren't intimidated by it soon after, but how long did that period take?
Well, to give you an idea, the very first time I picked up a camera in my life was actually only just over a year ago.
Oh wow, really?
Yeah. So I've been shooting for just over 1 year. I actually started shooting in June of last year.
Wow, okay.
So to answer the question, Frederick, I would say that almost immediately I felt comfortable with the camera. And I would say, from things like the compositional point of view and trying to understand the compositions and the light and things, For many years, I ran my own business, and of course, when you run your own business, you've got to wear different hats, you know. So, whether it's to do with marketing, or whether it's to do with finance, or logistics, or managing people, whatever, you wear different hats. The hat that I would say I enjoyed wearing every hat apart from to do with money. Accountancy, I really didn't like accountancy because it wasn't.
Totally
I don't think.
understandable. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a necessary evil of running your business. Is of course you've got to understand your numbers, but I didn't find any. I didn't glean any enjoyment from that, to be honest. Where I did really sort of really love, I really loved looking back, probably the more creative side of things, and that I don't just mean the marketing and dealing with marketing, but I mean running a business. For me, I was very big into change within the business, so I was very comfortable with change and putting myself in an uncomfortable position to change something, always for the better of the customer. So I would say that the area that I really loved was marketing, and I would say probably more so than anything else, and that was because of the amount of creativity that I could sort of bring into that area of the business. And I think it's only since I started photography that I realized that I probably always had a bit of an eye for composition and detail as a consequence of the amount of marketing that I did over the years, I think.
Okay, that's great. And but did you also like, because of course you went into probably YouTube or rabbit holes about settings, as you mentioned. Did you also like research composition and maybe vision kind of, or like vision philosophy kind of content
Yeah.
about photography, or was it purely technical? And because for me, your compositions are great. Like you really have an eye for it, exactly. But in a way, even if you have an eye for it, I think you kind of have to be educated in it as well, I think. Or
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I'm asking for you to prove me wrong, of course. But,
Yeah,
right.
yeah, I did. I didn't actually really go down the rabbit hole of composition and what makes a good composition.
Mhm.
A little bit. The rule of thirds is always something that I even think about now when I'm taking pictures. But I would say the more I get into photography, the more I'm starting to realize that the rule of thirds, whilst it's a good guide, it's not necessarily the be all and end all, and especially when you start pushing more creative shots. And definitely my photography, and I've really thrown myself at it the last year. So I go out nearly every day. So I would say that yeah, initially yes, but not to the degree. It was really about, I was really looking for inspirational photographers in the beginning, and to see what guide they could provide. So initially, when I first began, and again, bringing it back to business, the other thing I really like with business was people, was dealing with people, whether that be staff, customers, you know, colleagues, or whatever. It was, so I realized that I'm probably more of a people person than what I actually thought, because if you asked me to describe myself, I would say I'm naturally antisocial, and a little bit aloof. But the strange thing is, when I have my camera, that seems to sort of disappear as well. So the earlier inspiration and looking at the YouTube videos, and not necessarily from what makes a good shot from a composition point of view, or even from a technical point of view, but just what makes a good shot, an interesting shot. And I think I first found a guy who he's a Scottish photographer, and he was based in London, outside of Harrods, and he did a project called Harrodsville, and I'm trying to remember his name. Dougie Wallace.
Okay.
Dougie Wallace, and Dougie Wallace, he's just for me an out and out thoroughbred street photographer. And I saw the work at what the Dougie Wallace was doing and thought, wow, that is. So again, if you actually reference Dougie Wallace and look at him from a compositional point of view, there ain't much in terms of composition going on. He's capturing these moments with these people based outside of Harrods in London, and the work that he did, I just thought was exquisite, and I just loved his style. And his style, I don't know whether the inspiration behind his style was Bruce Gilden or not, but for me they're very, very similar, very brazen, very in your face. And when I began, I actually began just like that. I was very brazen and very in your face, and and taking very, very close up shots of interesting looking situations and people. You won't see that referenced on my Instagram because I feel that my style has changed a little bit now, and I don't really want to. I suppose I could have left it on and sort of shown the how my style has evolved, but it just looked a little bit messy on Instagram, so I tidied it up to really represent the style that I think where I've settled on.
Okay, cool. So yeah, you're not really doing those kind of portraits anymore, because I saw them on your website as well, and I was intrigued by it as well. But
yeah, I mean, I love taking street portraits as well, and whether that be candid or not candid, approaching a particular person. Sometimes a person for me is just too good to pass up, and I want to do the photograph more justice by engaging with the subjects and speaking to them, because I don't want to lose it. I don't want to try and get a poor candid shot. If I see somebody who I really, really, really get a strong emotional prick that I want a picture of this person, and I don't know what actually drives that prick, then I feel I've got to stop and speak to them and try to get a true portrait. And I really enjoy doing that as well. So, but I also like, you'll see on my website, you'll see candid moments of portraits, and again, I love those as well. So I just like it all.
okay, great. So yeah, because for me, like, what intrigued me is you reference, for example, Bruce Gillen, which is something I could never do. That, like, approaching people even is hard for me. Like I'm more leaning to your, or what I would do more is probably like your nighttime photos, for example, like the small individuals in the scene. That's more my thing. But that's also why I do this podcast, of course, because I'm aware that there's a vast array of types of street photography that you can do, and that makes it interesting. But that's why I asked for the street portraits, because I find it interesting, like, how do you approach them, or not approach them. So that's kind of like, how do you go about it if you see someone, you have the emotional prick that you say. What's the next step?
Yeah, well, the funny thing is this emotional whatever it is not. It's not driven. I see a lot of people on Instagram who take pictures of people with pink hair and things like that. It's not that. I don't know quite what gives me this emotional thing, but it isn't. Quite often, it isn't externally obvious. It's just something.
All right,
about
so it could just be some random person. It's not because they dress a certain way.
It could be the way, I don't know, the way that the mood looks, the way that they walk. I don't know what does it, but it's not obvious things. It's generally things that most people, I think, would find would just walk on by and see somebody with, face piercings and pink hair and things. Those don't really generally get my attention. So yeah, what do I do when I see somebody and I want to approach them? Well, I think, again, I keep referencing it. I know I do, but I think in business you've got to be able to sort of be put in a room full of strangers and hit upon some form of conversation and be relatively confident in doing that. And I think it's really from there that gives me the, if you like, the depth of character to be able to approach a complete stranger and just say hello, and start speaking to them. And I would say, how do I approach then asking for the picture? Like a lot of people you see on YouTube and things, they pay people compliments. I don't think I'd necessarily pay people compliments. I just tell them the truth, that you've really pricked my attention. Something about you has pricked my attention. And I'm working on I'm trying to document whatever place I'm in. So I'll say I'm documenting, Manchester or London or Paris or wherever it is I've been. In fact, one of the probably the best stories about this moment was I went to New York. I should have been going there
Mhm.
with my wife, but my wife fell ill, and I ended up spending 4 days in New York, just basically with me and the camera. And on the final day, I've never been to New York. Well, I've been to New York a long time ago, but of course, the world becomes a very different place when you hold a camera as well. That's something
Yeah.
else that I noticed. So I was walking along through New York on day 4, final day, and it was about 8 o'clock in the morning. And I saw this, what looked to be what you would describe as a native New Yorker, stood in this doorway, and he looked quite mean, quite moody. And he lifted up a cigar, and he lit a cigar, a big cigar, at 8 o'clock in the morning. And I thought, well, and I walked, and he was quite intimidating looking to me, and I walked past him. But I got the emotional thing, and then I had to have a word with myself. And I think this is good advice for any photographer. If you're out walking the streets and you're trying to get pictures of whatever, and especially if you're trying to get portraits, then just remind yourself why you're actually stood on this street with your camera in the first place, which is what I did, because I walked past him because he intimidated me. And
Mhm.
I felt that, like, this guy at 8 o'clock in the morning smoking a cigar wouldn't want me poking a camera in his face. So I had a chat with myself internally and said, look, for Christ's sake, you're in New York for this reason. Now turn back and go and speak to him. So that's what I did. I turned back, and it turns out his name was Andy, and he was a native New Yorker, and he loved New York, and he was probably one of the most friendliest people that I've ever met in my life. And
Yeah.
I said, could you do me a favor? Could you just take a puff of your cigar for you while I take a shot? And he said, sure, man. Yeah. And he took a, and that remains probably one of my favorite pictures, not
Okay.
necessarily because of the picture, but because of the feeling and everything else. So
Yeah.
my advice is a very long answer to a short question. Just remind yourself why you're out walking the streets with your camera in the first place,
Mhm.
and just be confident, and you'll find that 9 out of 10 people are incredibly approachable, despite what the demeanor would tell you on the outside. That they're incredibly open-minded, and actually I've found that quite a lot of them really enjoy having the picture taken.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. That's fair enough. Yeah. For me, it's like for me, it's hard on the streets, which is funny because as my day job, I do nothing else but photograph people on events or
Mm,
make their portraits. But then on the streets, all of a sudden I get shy because, as you say, like you see these people who might look mean or angry or whatever, and you're
yeah,
like,
yeah,
I'm not gonna bother them. But in the end, it's
yeah,
just like some people just have what's it called, resting bitch face. So they're
yeah, yeah,
probably
yeah,
very friendly, but yeah,
yeah, yeah,
they
yeah.
um.
I think
So
most
that's
people are. I think most people are. But of
yeah.
course, if you saw me stood out on the street, I'd probably have a face that you would think, I can't go near. I don't want to go and bother that guy. So,
Mm.
but I would say, like most people, I'm friendly. So
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, of course, but exactly like people on the street might not immediately see that. That's also something I was thinking about because for me, like you're yeah, as you said, you're a guy who you go out at night, you photograph people, and for me that like if I would do that, I would be really self aware about being a man with a camera sneaking around at night. I know that's not what we're doing, but that might come across like that. So
Yeah,
during
for
your
sure.
night shots, do you have like a certain way you behave differently or something to make the people more comfortable? Or
No,
of course,
nighttime tends to be different. I don't I don't ask for portraits at night.
mm,
I sort of tend to, the type of shots that I'm seeking at night, I'm more, sometimes more creative, sometimes a little bit more abstract, sometimes just deliberately going for the single isolated silhouette inside of the big bright city. So my style radically changes at night time, and I find myself sort of again visiting parts of the city that I would never normally sort of expect to find myself in, because I am walking down sort of the back alleys. I'm
mhm,
not sort of I'm not keeping on the main sort of streets. And I do tend to find that, that obviously that sometimes can lead you into a certain situation that could be, some people would find very difficult, especially with if you've got an expensive camera sort of around your neck. And when I speak to, because I've made quite a number of friends now, and this here in Manchester, street photography seems to really be a growing thing. And again, I really like to sort of just have a chat with other street photographers. But the common thread seems to be that people don't really like to go out at night because they feel a little bit unsafe. They're scared that they'll get mugged. And honestly, I've never felt scared. I've been down alleys where there's been what you might think were undesirable people. And again, I come back to the thought that people generally are good. And I've never had a bad encounter at all at night. Having said that, again, with the introduction of videos now, and especially, I don't know, I'm sure it happens in all major cities, but here in Manchester, what is quite prevalent is videos going around late at night when the pubs and the clubs are closing up,
mhm.
and they're basically young people and young females tottering around the streets wearing not a great deal. And there's now video footage coming out with clearly people that are candidly taking video and just aiming the camera at nothing but young females, which don't have a great deal of clothing on. And that, I would say, is what I'm more mindful of at night, is I don't want to sort of come across as the type of person that is skulking around in the background,
Yeah.
pointing my camera at things like that, at subjects like that, because that is really first and center in my mind. And I had an instance actually only at weekend this week where I was trying to get a reflection shot. There was a very, very highlighted area on the other side of the road. I'd just finished a workshop with a guy called Matt Hall in London, called the 13th Second. And if
I
people aren't
follow him as
aware,
well, I think, yeah.
yeah, if people aren't aware of the 13th Second and Matt Hall's work, I would say without a doubt, check him out, because he's amazing. So he's inspired me really to sort of start looking for more reflection shots, and he sort of was giving me tips on what he looks for. And I sort of found a scenario that was a big tick. I was pointing my camera inside a brightly lit bar, but inside of the bar there was no people. It was
Yeah.
deserted. There wasn't one person in the bar. I
So
don't
it
know whether
wasn't
the
even
bar,
open, or
I'm not sure. It might not have been open.
yeah.
All the lights were on, but you
Mm.
can, and the shot is on Instagram actually.
Okay.
And it's, and you can see in this brightly colored, and it was all the bright colors that really caught my attention of the bar. But there's nobody in the bar. There's nobody sat down. There's not one person in the bar. And I was just using the glass of the bar as really as a reflection for what was on the other side of the road, which was a very bright sign, and I was waiting for a subject to come through on the other side of the road, and then all of a sudden I got set on by a girl that clearly thought I was doing something sort of wrong, and grabbed the bouncers of the next door bar, marched the bouncers over to try to get them to tell me to stop taking photographs, and just basically went pretty crazy at me, saying, yeah, I know what you're doing, and and it's wrong, and tried to show him my work on Instagram and say, look, it's not what you think it is. And but I at this point I still hadn't got the shot I wanted, so I wasn't really put off too much, but it just really reinforces the fact that there are heightened emotions, and I would say around young females, especially out at night time, for good reason.
Yeah, I can understand the approach
for good reason. I'm not saying it's wrong. I understand, but as a street photographer, going about your business, that you're just trying to sort of, it does make it a little bit more difficult, because, and especially as a male street photographer, I'm pretty sure, if a female street photographer was doing the same shot, I'm pretty sure that would not have attracted the same amount of attention from the young female, as and that's not being me being sexist in any way. It's just stating a fact, I believe. So I'm in other words, Frederick, I'm mindful of those situations, and to be honest, that's why I sort of tend to keep away from the main streets, because the main streets are where all the activity are, and the bars and everything else.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah.
So if I can find back streets where I'm able to sort of find an interest and wait for a subject to walk through, maybe just a street lamp or something like that, you could sort of give yourself the argument that's even more creepier, because you're down the back alley waiting where, but either
in a way,
way,
yeah, but I understand the philosophy behind it. Yeah, makes total sense.
But whatever, it doesn't put me off.
No.
It's just part and parcel of night photography, and now I actually only shoot on a camera that actually has no video capability as well, and that actually is really I'm super mindful of videos. So my camera is just a camera.
So you don't use the Fuji 100X anymore, or?
No. I've gone bananas and ended up with a completely unnecessary camera, but I like it.
Yeah, but that's photography. I think it's partly doing it for the art, partly because you really like the technology and the cameras and the lenses.
For sure.
It's that's a problem I have as well. So I can't hold that against you. So I was curious, like, because you go out at night, like especially now in summer, of course, it's nighttime happens very late.
Very late.
Like how late do you go out? How long do you stay out as well?
Yeah, so now at this time of year now, if I feel like I really want to go out at night time, I probably don't go out while at least 10 o'clock, maybe 11. So, and I would stay out I'd probably typically stay out around about 3 to 4 hours, somewhere around there. So, so I can't wait for winter to come, because I'm normally in bed for 10 o'clock. So, feels very, very late to be sort of walking around the streets, but I just find it hard to get inspired in the daytime.
I can imagine that. Yeah, and also for me, I like photographing during the nighttime as well. But for me, of course, it's too late indeed. And also, like, if it's already dark at like 5 or 6, you have the afternoon rush, and then you have more people while it's still dark. So it's totally different.
It is.
Those seasons.
And the weather, the weather's worse, which makes it better in winter. So not only do we get the dark earlier, but we generally get the more interesting weather as well. So,
and the reflections in the floor, because it's wet.
Yeah,
Though right now we have a lot of rain as well, so it might
we
work
do,
there
we
too.
do, we do. Yeah, yeah.
But okay, that's cool. And you mentioned you with the story with the window with the bouncers that you were waiting there for a shot. Like, how long do you typically wait for a shot?
No, not too long. Again, when I began, I was, I mean, if we're talking sort of hunter or fisherman, I would say in the
Mm.
beginning, I was nothing but a hunter. I'd shoot
Mhm.
while I was walking. I really wouldn't stop. I would be using mainly zone focusing, and just sort of trying to get those moments. Um, Whereas now, I would say I sort of see an interesting scene. I would say typically 10 to 15 minutes.
Okay.
Not really beyond that. I sort of get impatient and then think, well, I take a picture of the scene and then think, well, I'll keep it in the memory bank, and at
Yeah,
some
for
point
later.
I go back to it. So I tend to sort of do that more often than not. So yeah, 10 to 15 minutes would be about the tops, really.
Yeah. Okay. And also, so you mentioned you go out almost daily or daily or
Almost every day.
yeah.
Yeah. So not necessarily at night every day.
No, no, of course.
And I would say now I'm in the habit of carrying the camera pretty much almost everywhere I go. Because, you know, you just come across something that invariably you come across something when you don't have your camera and you think,
Yeah.
I really wish I had my camera here. So the things that typically I like in the daytime, are a bit of a cliche really in the street photography world. Is I do like the shadows and the contrast. I, I can't help it. I just really like the look of it.
It's always fun to, like, as you say, it's kind of cliche, but at the same time it still works. It's still fun to make. It's so yeah, why not?
Correct. Yeah, it's lovely. So in the daytime, I would say that's sort of what I'm drawn to. Or if I see an interesting person, and again I have a chat, and I can get a portrait there as well. So we tend to sort of take my camera pretty much everywhere I go these days. Although I'm probably looking at getting a smaller camera, because the camera I've got is quite a large camera.
Mhm.
So I'm probably looking at getting the Ricoh GR.
Yeah, I was
Just
gonna say yeah.
yeah, just to keep in the pocket. I've got a couple of friends actually that shoot on exclusively on the Ricoh, and they really like it. So yeah, it'll probably be something like a Ricoh that I just try and sort of just keep in my pocket. Yeah.
Yeah, and it because for me the Ricoh camera is it's like a lot of photographers tend to it because it's smaller, not necessarily because of the weight or stuff, but because it's
Yeah.
less obvious and intrusive. Is that
Yeah.
also why you would like it, or mainly for the portability?
No, I'm not bothered. I'll be honest. I quite like engagement when I lift my camera up, because I tend to use the viewfinder more often than not.
Mhm.
And if somebody does see me taking a picture and comes rushing over and says, "Did you just take my picture?" I actually quite like that. Uh, Perversely enough, because I feel it stimulates conversation, and I'm beginning to realize that my photography is not just about the pictures, but it's about
Mhm.
engagement with people. So
Yeah, I was
yeah,
just going to ask, like, what draws you to street photography? Because it's like it's clearly that you make great images, but it's clearly that you, if you talk about it now, that you're more talking about the engagement and the meetings with people rather than
yeah,
having the nice photos and that stuff. So
for
um,
sure. I would say that's a big part of it, if not probably half of it. I mean, I've met some people either with taking the picture and having a chat afterwards, or people seeing the camera and coming up to me and speaking to me about what I'm doing. Um, I've met some people that I would never have met in
mm,
my normal life. I've met some people who tell me some of their life story, uh, and I'm just incredibly humbled, really, by some of the people that I meet and some of the stories that I hear. And I would say that's a big part of why I do what I do. I enjoy, even though I describe myself as naturally antisocial,
mhm.
I I am realizing that I really enjoy these brief encounters
Yeah.
with people. You know, I really like it. So I would say that when I lift the camera up to the viewfinder, I would say that deep down, there is always a suspicion that somebody, it might provoke a response from somebody. And sometimes that can be, you know, I speak to my friends about you know, confrontation and people coming up to them. And some of my friends, considering they've been shooting for, you know, for many years, so you know, I've had one instance. I've had one instance where somebody came up to me and, well, I can honestly say in the short time that I've been taking pictures, I don't know what I do, but it seems to be almost every time I go out, I get somebody approaching me, and
Okay.
quite often, you know, can sometimes be, I wouldn't say aggressive, but quite heightened sense of emotion.
Mm.
And it's amazing how quick they calm down when you just sort of have a chat with them and you remain calm, and you don't respond in a way that they probably expect you to respond.
Yeah.
My response quite often is very open, very honest, and you know, and within seconds they calm right down, and again I end up having a really good chat with most people.
Yeah. You just explain
Yeah,
what you're doing, why they caught your eye,
yeah,
and
yeah.
perhaps if you can provide them the photo. Yeah.
There's no ill intent. I'm not trying to make them look bad. Um, you know, I show them the sort of stuff that I take pictures of, and then they seem to flip then and become really interested,
Mm.
and you know, and that happens quite a lot. I would say it's only twice where that hasn't happened, and where it was the aggression persisted. So, you know, in that instance, again, you just remain calm.
Yeah.
Of course, I offer to delete the image, and if they insist on deleting the image, then of course I will do. I don't try to be sneaky and keep it and
Mm.
pretend to delete. I know some people pretend to delete
Yeah, or
and
you can
keep it.
delete the JPEG while you still keep the raw or stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't do that. I think if they're adamant that they do not want their picture anywhere, then I think as photographers, and as people wandering around the street, I think we should respect that, and
Of
genuinely
course.
get rid of the image. Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely true. So how much time a day do you photograph, more or less? It's every day that you do the 3 to 4 hours, or?
No, no. If I'm popping out to the shop, I think, well, I'll walk a long way around to the
Yeah.
shop, and then I'll, you know, so it could be. It's generally never less than 2 hours, you know.
Oh wow.
So
Okay. So
even if I pop to the shop, I'll, a bit like what we described when we first hooked up on this meeting. You know, I I intend to go to the shop, but then I end up
take it.
meandering,
Yeah.
and then I see something and I walk down there, and then I see something else and I carry on. So yeah, so it tends to be a minimum of a couple of 2 hours really. And then sometimes if I predominantly shoot on my own, but again I've made, you know, a handful of friends that I go out with. And for me, the photography becomes a secondary thing when I go out with other people. It's more about friendship, and it's more about sort of having a chat. Of course, we've all
Yeah.
got our cameras. I have to be a little bit mindful of that because those guys probably don't get out as much as I do. So I've got to be a little bit careful and not just view it too much as a social. Um, but I tend to not take my photography too serious when I go out with other people.
Okay.
So
Yeah. I can imagine, because that's also something, not what I struggle with, but what I was curious about to other photographers is, like, for me, if I go out with, usually it's friends and they're not into photography. Like, for example, last month I went to a city trip to Rome with a friend,
yeah,
but he's not into photography, so it was
yeah,
just like a city trip with a friend. But I, of course, brought my camera, did
yeah,
some photography here and there. I did some street photos. But like, I noticed, like, I really loved Rome. It's a great city, I think, for street photography. But I didn't get to it, so because there was someone
no,
involved there. So that's why I'm curious to other people, like if other people around them make them less or more, yeah, productive is maybe not the right word because it's not a product that you're making or anything, but
Yeah.
it's yeah. So it's that's kind of like that impacts you, but for you that's not an issue.
No, I think it's difficult. I think if you're with somebody else and you're in a city, I mean, don't get me wrong, I've been away to cities with my wife, and I'm sort of probably in that city because first and foremost, I want to go there to take pictures. So I would say that is, I think I've learned the hard way, really, that those two things don't really go together.
Yeah.
You know, and I would make an exception and say that's it. That's the time where you should leave the camera at home. If you if you're with somebody and you're visiting places together and you're traveling, but your priority is to take images, but yet you've got a relationship
Yeah.
with a loved one, or even a close friend, whatever it is, then I think the camera is very antisocial.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I didn't intend to do street photography there. I just brought my camera
No,
because you always make
yeah,
photos on holiday. But I noticed that like then it was for me like, oh yeah, it's kind of a roadblock. Not that it
yeah,
bothers me at that point, but it's yeah, there's a time and a place for photography and a time and a place for relationships.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, yeah.
So okay, and so if you go out with those friends, is it like you guys meet at a certain spot, or and how does that differ? Like if you go out on yourself, so not to the shop, but if you for example at night you go to a place to photograph, do you have like
Yeah.
a set route you want to take, or is it more like you go to a specific place and then you'll see what happens, or how do you?
Yeah, I think it varies a little bit. When I go out with, I'll probably go out with maybe one or two other people. Certainly no more than two, possibly three every now and again, because again, you're a group of photographers all looking at quite often the same scene. Is not great. One of it might well be that one of the guys that I'm meeting up with says, you want to meet up. There's a particular, like here in Manchester, we have very old Victorian buildings that were really the birthplace of the Industrial Revolution, and quite a lot of the structures still stand today. Some of them in a bit of a bad way, and some of them have been regenerated and repurposed into apartments or offices or whatever. But there's some quite nice, interesting scenes here, and certainly with the old Victorian areas that we've got, when the sun is out, you do get some quite nice, striking shadows from those old buildings. So some of the guys might say, I want to go to an old Victorian bridge where there's a shaft of light comes through at 4:30 in the afternoon, and I really want to try and sort of capture that. So there might be one or two places at a certain time where one of the guys wants to go. Generally speaking, I don't pre-plan any too much like that. We tend to just wander around, chase the light. We'll have we've just recently found a little coffee place that sells good coffee and cake, so we'll always put that on the route as well. So yeah, things like that. The night time, I tend to only go out with one other guy who's a really good friend. Again, he's on Insta. He's called Tibor Varga. I think his Instagram he's just changed it. TB Shoots Raw, TIBI Shoots Raw, I think it is. Tibor Varga.
I see him, yeah.
Have you got him? So so myself and Tibor will go out. We'll probably meet up maybe once a month and go out in the evening at night time. He really enjoys nighttime photography as well. But again, I think we tend to view it more as a social thing and walking around together rather than, the photography is secondary, and for
Yeah.
me it is anyway. And just walking around, and if I come away with a shot, then it's a bonus, really.
Yeah. Okay. And to me now, for me, that's like the frequency you photograph it. So like it's almost daily, and
Yeah.
quite long as well, daily. So I'm sure you have like a huge catalog of photos. Do you, how do you go about editing them? Is it all in Lightroom and you
Yeah.
catalog them, or how do
Get to
you?
look. Yeah. Yeah. I edit exclusively in Lightroom.
Mhm.
I don't know how to use Photoshop, and I never really feel. I think again, I don't condemn anybody who sort of who manipulates the image into the final product, if we want to call it a product, that they want to represent and that they're happy to show. I feel that if I can't do it in Lightroom and I've got to start pulling it out and taking it over to Photoshop, then I, I, I personally, I feel like I've possibly failed a little bit, and I'm trying to turn it into an image that
Yeah,
is
that
is
it's not.
is not
Yeah.
is not really that isn't good enough. So yeah, I edit exclusively in Lightroom. I've created probably a half a dozen presets for myself, and they tend to be in line with what the situation is that I've been
Mm.
shooting. So I have like a preset, for instance, which is very high contrast. So I can click that and see what response that gives me. I have a preset that I have two presets dedicated for nighttime shots. One of them is for low light. So if the light is quite low, then I have a preset which I've designed basically for low light, and then I have another one where the lights are quite strong, and the lighting's good. So I have two, and then from there I tend to sort of start then just massaging the image, just
Mm.
sort of using maybe the brush. I will, although I find myself using it less. The um, the denoise on Lightroom.
Oh yeah.
Uh, I was yeah. If the image is a good image, but there's a little bit too much noise on it due to the ISO, then I will denoise it. A lot of people tend to sort of frown on the denoise tool and say, well, that's that you're trying to create an image for something that it isn't. I don't necessarily agree with that.
I
I
love
think
it.
yeah, so
For mainly for my event photography, which is often at like ISOs of 4,000 and up. So I
yeah,
can't work around it. But like for street photography, in a way, I don't mind a bit of noise then, but at the same
yeah,
time, like
yeah,
it's there. It doesn't change the photo in any way. It just makes it a bit more crisp.
yeah. I
And so
agree.
I don't see the issue with it.
No. So I do use that, although because the camera I'm now using is the Hasselblad, the X2D,
Oh, wow.
and yeah, and the Hasselblad X2D. I've noticed that due to the size of the sensor and everything else, that I'm reaching for the denoise a lot less than what I used to do. So, and I'm also using a different lens as well now. I moved from the Fuji. I didn't keep the Fuji very long, purely because I saw a Leica Q2 mono for sale on eBay, and I put in a bid for the Q2 mono that I honestly thought that the guy would just say absolutely not. And to my surprise, he said, "Yeah, if you can collect it this afternoon, you can have it for that price." So I ended up with a Leica Q2 mono, and one of my mates always pokes fun at me because when I was shooting with the Fuji, I said I feel like you've got to earn your stripes for a Leica, and I'll only buy a Leica once I feel like I've earned my
Mm.
stripes. And I think about a week later, I ended up with a Leica, so he always reminds me of that. Um, and so I really enjoyed shooting in nothing but black and white for quite a long time, for months, and but with the 28mm lens, I found that I was cropping a lot. Um, So it really, the camera was telling me that I probably bought the wrong camera. The 28mm lens was probably not quite right for me. There were certain instances, of course, where it was great, but and now on the Hasselblad, I've got the Hasselblad. I've got the 55mm lens on it, which I think
Okay.
is equivalent. I think something like 38mm full frame. I think, and I find that to be an absolute sweet spot of a lens size for me. So, so as a consequence, I'm cropping a lot less, which means that the image is not the quality of the image is not being compromised, and then I'm having to denoise, I guess. So yeah. But it is quite a big, heavy camera to lug around. But it's just an absolute thing of beauty to hold and use. So
Yeah, that's for me. Yeah, I'm on Nikon because it's for my job. It's easier. My dad used to be a Nikon camera owner, not a Nikon guy, because he just had one camera. But for me, I stayed with Nikon because it's easier for the lenses and stuff.
yeah,
But like
yeah,
if I see the Leica cameras, it's indeed it's like it's just nice to hold. It looks
sure,
good.
yeah,
It makes photography fun.
yeah, yeah,
There was one time, I'm not sure who it was anymore, but there was a video about some guy explaining that you should buy, like, even if it's too expensive, like buy a camera that you like holding because it will
yeah,
help you do more photography. It's
yeah.
no use to buy an ugly camera if you'll never use it.
No, and I'm also starting to do a lot of or not a lot, but I'm beginning to do sort of studio photography as well a little bit.
Oh, cool.
Sort of getting into that a little bit. So I'm finding that the quality of the Hasselblad inside of a studio environment is just great as well. So really, the camera's got to be multi-purpose, and it
Yeah.
definitely is that. Yeah.
So do you always use the 55 millimeter now, or do you change lenses sometime?
Well, I've had to sell an organ in order to fund the Hasselblad and two lenses. So I've got two lenses. I've got the 55mm and I've got a 90mm. But the 90mm, I did try it out on the street a couple of times, but I couldn't get on with it. I just didn't like it. I didn't even like it. I didn't like taking shots with the 90mm. And I know, again, some people would say, well, you've got to get outside of your comfort zone and you've got to, you'll learn, and then that'll make you a better photographer. I don't disagree with it. But by the same token, if you're not feeling inspired, and when you go out and you sort of, you're struggling a little bit with that lens choice, then
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Is it really what? I don't know. For me, street
No.
photography it's a very emotional thing. I'm not really out there to try and, to put myself under pressure. I'm out there just to capture little moments that I spot and that I see, and that's it. That's really where it's at. So, so yeah, the
Exactly.
90mm, the 90mm I've found comes into its own on portraits, but I wouldn't swap that over on the street. I wouldn't take a 90 out on the street and start swapping lenses over. I'd just shoot with the 55, and if I want a portrait, I'll use the 55. So
Yeah. Yeah. For me, like to come back to the get out of comfort zone thing. Like for me, it's there's two ways to think about it. Like you can use like one lens, one camera, and really get good with it and get comfortable with it, and like just know it inside out and don't even have to
yeah,
think about the camera anymore. That's
yeah,
usually not how I am, but I appreciate people who can be. For me, it's like I like going out with different lenses, trying out different stuff, different techniques. So like for me, my comfort zone actually is trying out new stuff. Like
uh,
I think I would. I'm not sure if I would get bored, but it would be.
yeah.
It would become very difficult for me after a while to only use one camera and one lens for like
Okay,
months on end. I think so. I
yeah,
think it's like it's just how you are as a person, how you shoot as a person, but also like what type of scenes you look for. So I don't think there's a right or a wrong in this.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
I agree.
so I would love to be the guy who could just bring out one camera, one lens all the time, and that would work. But for me, yeah, that doesn't
Yeah,
work.
like you say, we're all we're all individuals, and
Hmm.
we'll do what we want to do and what keeps us interested and inspired, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah, that's also the reason for this podcast, because I had all these questions about, like, you mentioned earlier that you're like you like watching through the viewfinder because it might spark an interaction with someone. There's other photographers who never look at a viewfinder. I spoke to Stefano Broli from London in the previous episode.
Yeah.
And he even look at the screen or the viewfinder. He just shoots intuitively, so to speak. And that's not wrong. That's not right. That's not wrong.
No.
Same as looking through the viewfinder. But it's like, for me, when I'm out in the street, I'm often very mindful of what I'm doing. It's like, do I have to look through the viewfinder? What will give me the best results? How do other people do it? And there's no right or wrong, but it's just like, that's the reason for the podcast, to just show people, like, find a way that works for you. Listen to all these people. They all have different ways of doing things. Pick one that might work for you and try it out. But don't don't read a blog like, you have to look through the viewfinder because that's how Hurwitz used to do it.
Yeah.
He didn't have any options. He had to look through the viewfinder.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, I agree.
So that's kind of also like something silly as like, do you listen to music or podcasts or anything while you're out on the streets? Some people need to listen what's happening on the street. I sometimes like a bit of music. It helps me get into a certain state of mind.
Yeah.
So that's there's no right or wrong. It's just like, find out what works for you, try different things, and then see what sticks and what you enjoy. Exactly.
Yeah. I think listening to music is a new thing for me. I've just started listening to music.
Oh, really?
And wow, I think it transforms the feeling of taking pictures.
And do you have like a certain specific genre or artist, even maybe specifically?
Yeah, well, my son is a jazz musician, and he's a jazz musician that works and lives in London, and throughout the years he sort of influenced my choice of music, and I like my go-to music, I would say, is by a guy called Tigran Hamasyan, who's a piano player. And Tigran grew up, I can't remember. I don't know whether it's Kyrgyzstan or somewhere. I can't remember. I think I'm wrong saying that, but his uncle, Armenian, that's it. And his uncle was big into metal. So, but he grew up being a classical musician, and now he's fused metal with the classical training of a pianist.
That's incredible.
And his time signatures on the piano, and it's just incredible. So I listened to him and another guy a lot called Dafa Youssef, who is from, I think he's Maltese. I think Dafa Youssef is great. But the point is I now really enjoy listening to music. I almost feel completely detached from everything. I don't know. It has a funny effect. Does it on you? Do you feel that it puts you into a different space?
I like to put on more repetitive, like house music and soft techno. So nothing too hard, but it's like repetitive and layered, like textured music. And that helps me get more focus, but also like it puts you in a certain mood, which kind of seeps into your photography as well. So
I agree.
So I think everyone has their genre, of course. Some people might listen to heavy, hard techno or metal, or I don't know, which probably influences their photography in a way. But I think that's an interesting aspect for it, because it can be like, I totally understand listening to the city as well. I sometimes do it too, because I've tried putting on podcasts, which is kind of like anti myself, of course. Like, you can listen to this podcast while you're out in the streets, but I can, because I'm not listening to the people speaking. For me, just like some kind of noise, so it's kind of wasted in that regards. But with the music, it does give it an extra edge.
Yeah, I agree.
Like, do you have like you photograph every day, do you edit as well every day, or is it more like how do you like editing your photos first of all, or is
Uh,
it like a necessary evil for you?
I think it's a necessary evil. But I'm disciplined to. I think that the one thing that I think I'm quite an obsessional person by nature. So I think I'm all in, or I'm not all in. So I tend to find that I don't like. I know some people like just like the process of going out on the street, taking the picture, and building up this, this massive bank of images that they never really properly get to. I I couldn't do that. I almost immediately when I come in, I have to plug my camera in and get the images and look at them, and that can be problematic when you're coming in, very very late,
I was gonna ask, yeah,
because
do you still do it if it's at, yeah.
yeah, and I'm trying to sort of discipline myself to say it doesn't matter. Put your camera down, leave it while the morning. It'll give you something to do tomorrow, so don't worry about it. But sometimes I get an image that I think, yeah, I think that image was great, and I just, because sometimes you'll know that you think you've got a great image and you put it on the screen and it's just rubbish, and you think,
Yeah.
oh, and
Luckily,
sometimes
it
you
also
take,
works the other way around. Yeah.
yeah, I'm gonna say, then those are like the bits that you look at and you think, oh wow, yeah, I didn't spot that detail, or I didn't see that, and it works the other way around. So I would say overall I enjoy editing my images, but being more into and especially being into nighttime photography in the summertime means that when I get in, I plug my camera in. It can be very late by the time I'm sort of crawling into bed sometimes. So.
Oh, yeah.
Or I'll download it, not edit, have a quick scan through and leave them while tomorrow and start it. But what I don't do, I'll always edit the images before I go out taking any more pictures.
Okay, yeah. That's, yeah, for me, first of all, I recognize the coming home at whatever hour, and you
Yeah,
have to, I do it as well. Like I have to see the photos on my computer,
yeah,
just to know they're safe as well, that I have
yeah,
I have a computer version. If my camera explodes all of a sudden, I still have the photos, which never happens, but yeah, still it's a
yeah,
good peace of mind. So I get that. I also sometimes edit at night, so that's something
yeah,
same as you, I have to be careful for. But I think it's good that you edit the photos before you go out again, um, because that, for me, like if I don't edit the photos right away, I also kind of lose interest in them in some
yeah,
way,
yeah. I agree.
which is sad because sometimes they're still good photos, but the momentum is gone.
Yeah, yeah.
So
I think
that's
yeah.
nice to hear that I'm not the only one struggling with that.
Yeah, I
Uh,
think you're right. I think that word momentum is the key thing, really, because that's what it is. It's seen the job through from start to
mm,
end. You know, why would you start a job and not finish it? It
yeah,
sort of
exactly.
seems a bit counterintuitive to go through all this time, effort, and energy to walk around and do what we do, and then to only do half of the job.
Yeah,
Just my personal opinion. I'm not condemning anybody,
no, of
but
course,
yeah,
exactly. But yeah,
but
it's,
that's personally how I feel.
and I
So
wonder because there's a lot of similarities I find between us too. Also because you come from this business background.
mm,
Um, for me, there's what I tend to do. It's mostly with my professional photography, but sometimes also with my street photography. It's like I put in self evaluation moments. So I
right,
go through my photos and say like, this I've done good. So, like more of this. It could be anything like good
yeah,
lens choice, good aperture choice,
yeah,
good
whatever,
timing, good interaction with the subject, whatever exactly.
yeah, yeah.
Or and it could be like, okay, this I did badly, this I can improve on, and I give myself action points. I have a suspicion you might be similar. I'm not sure if you
Yeah.
maybe do it as like I really have like a spreadsheet with like
Do you
uh,
have a spreadsheet?
yeah, I have like a spreadsheet with like
Do
in
you?
one column I do like either the specific photo name or the overall assignment title,
Yeah.
and then I have like a column with I'm gonna have a look if I have it here. and I can't find it immediately. But it's like one column with the things I did good, one column with the things I did bad, and one column with takeaways. So
Yeah.
working points. I, I'm sure that no one's as crazy in that as me, perhaps. But like, I wonder, because I found you reach back to the business kind of thing as well. So if you might have that kind of moment, or maybe reflex. It might not be like a scheduled moment, but it's maybe
It's
a
not
reflex.
not 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 to the degree of documenting anything, or or recording anything like on a
Yeah.
spreadsheet, but I am continuously reevaluating my work. And what I'm finding more and more and more now is that I'm becoming much more selective on the pick on taking photographs.
On the moments
So
you like really taking, yeah, okay, so you take it
yeah,
rather
like when
slowly.
I started, I would come back with 500-600 images, and just whereas now I probably come back with 50-60 images,
Mm.
and there will be some of those might be 5 shots of the same scene. So the number of images that I'm now taking per scene, or number of scenes I'm taking now, is probably a lot less. So
But your
I'm
keepers have been the same amount still.
yeah, and
Yeah.
I think that has arrived at a similar way by what you were saying, Frederick, on you and your spreadsheet. So I'm now almost doing a mental checklist when I'm picking my camera up, thinking, well, is this, is this worthy of a picture almost?
Yeah. Is it like a
You know,
conscious decision, or is it more like something you
yeah,
feel like with the people
emotion.
you
Yeah, it's
photograph?
more
Yeah.
emotional. Yeah. And I think what I'm beginning to do is to learn when the photograph is worth taking or not, and that's, I would say that's definitely something that I'm noticing that is becoming much more prevalent when I go out taking pictures. But I am finding that also that I'm putting myself in stranger situations in order to get the type of picture that I want. So yeah, I could find myself at the crunched at the bottom of a stairwell, waiting for a subject to come through, and so I'm finding that I'm in selecting the shot, in trying to select a better shot. I'm finding that I'm putting myself into physical positions, which were at one point I would have never thought I would have done.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
of course, you get some strange looks because somebody walks around to walk down these stairs, and there's this, little fat bald guy at the bottom who's basically pointing a camera at them. So it's a funny situation.
I mean,
But
that can help with the photo, perhaps, well, like with the reaction looking at the
yeah,
camera. But
it can do. Yeah. So yeah, things
um,
like that I quite like.
okay.
But also, I definitely, I'm finding inspiration. I tend to buy quite a number of photo books. And I find that the photo books definitely help as well in keeping my motivation levels high.
In
Um,
what kind of way? Because yeah. But in what kind of way do they help you stay
well,
motivated?
otherwise, I think a common thing that us street photographers fall into is taking pictures of the same scene, same
Mm.
type of scene, over and over and over and over and over again, and then you get sort of in this bit of a rut. And I find that just by buying a new photo book and really absorbing that photo book, suddenly you start thinking about those shot choices differently.
Yeah.
So, so I would urge anybody to look around for photo books, and I'm not talking necessarily either the go-tos, the Sol
Yeah. The
Lighters, and
classics.
the
Yeah.
and I'm not, again, I'm not. There's no disrespect intended by that statement, but look at more contemporary people. Look at people who are current, and and today. And
Yeah.
one book I'd really, really, really like to recommend heavily. I just love it, and it's a book that I just adore, and it's a book by a guy called Ollie Kellett, and it's called Crossroad Blues. And I just find this book has been, for me, super inspirational.
Okay, and it's like a recent book as well.
It's a recent book, so it's a contemporary book. And I got to hear Ollie talk down in London a few weeks ago. And yeah, he's definitely a true artist. And but that, of course, and then, you know, I look at old art, L.S. Lowry,
Yeah.
Manchester-based artist. So again, I sort of tend to look at art. And then recently, I've bumped into Harry Gruyaert. I don't know the
yeah, Harry Gruyaert,
yeah, who's I think, is he Belgium? I think he might be from Belgium, but lived in France.
Belgian photographer, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I think just books
from my
can
city
be.
as well.
Is he really?
Yeah, he's from here.
Oh, yeah. Have you not checked him out? Nice.
Not into detail. No, I know the name, but it's one of those classics. Like
yeah, have a look at his stuff, because you talk about a guy who never puts the camera down, and he never puts his camera down. You know, no matter who he's with or where he is. You know,
but to me, like, I think that's a good point from the contemporary books as well, because like I've recently bought like a book from, it's Brussels, but it's nearby, and it's with all these photographers that, like, some I know, even it's like people from now, and it's because you see the scenes and you know the photos, or you know the scenes as they are, because if it's like a book from 60 years old, the city has changed a lot in 60 years.
I agree. Yeah.
So that kind of helps you visualize the work better as well, so you can learn more from it, because you know all the parameters, which I like.
Yeah, for sure.
But good advice on the books as well, and also so of course the old books.
Yeah, you know, I've got the I've got Sol Leiter books as well, and Vivian Mayer. Vivian Mayer was probably the very first book that I ever bought, and that was fantastic. So I would say that if your mojo's just getting a little bit low and you're feeling a little bit locked into doing things the same way, then my recommendation would be to try and if you can afford to buy a one or two books, then certainly start to look at books. And if you can't afford the books, then just research some great photographers and get online and look at them that way. So
most of them have websites.
Yeah.
One more question, because like it's been on my mind since the beginning actually, but I forgot it throughout, but now it pops up again. It's like you just talked about, like, losing your mojo and feeling in a rut, kind of. But to me, like you said, you go out almost daily, or you go out daily, almost always in Manchester. Like, I'm not sure how big Manchester is actually, but
not
like
very
after a while, don't you get like sick of your city, or how does that happen?
That's where I say that's exactly where I would say the books help. Because, if you look at the book, say, from Ollie Kellett, his compositions, he's always raised. So he's always finding something that takes him off ground level. Whether he's stood in a car park, or whether he's stood on a bridge, or whatever. Now, I don't know about you, but I never look for elevated positions in my city.
I actually do. My problem with Antwerp is that there's no elevation anywhere.
Okay.
We don't have bridges. We don't have nothing. God. Yeah, it's crazy.
Oh, well, so for me, it all of a sudden now I go, okay, where can I find elevated positions? So immediately I start seeing my home city through a different perspective, different perspective. And then I do that, and we don't have many elevated positions. So, and then I look at like Ernst Haas, and I look at Ernst Haas, who's Austrian, and he just his way of seeing the world is just, so for me, I then go out and it's like I'm in my home city for the first time again, because I'm ignoring all those obvious things that my emotion would take me, and I'm saying no, we're looking for reflections. No, we're looking for elevated positions.
Yeah. Okay.
No, we're looking for people. No, we're looking for this. So all of a sudden you can sort of almost revisit your city again if you get into this different mindset.
Yeah, exactly. And is it like, because it feels really intentional that you give yourself these like assignments or like borders of only reflections, or is it really like something you like you intentionally go out with, okay, today I'm only going to do reflections, and can you keep yourself at it as well, or you sometimes cheat and it's like, oh, this is a
No,
nice
yeah. I think you go out with that intention and think, right, I'm going to go out today and I'm going to really hunt for reflections. And I think, yeah, but then all of a sudden we're like dogs who see a rabbit, because then all of a
yeah.
sudden we see something. Oh, wow, look at this over here. And then before you know it, you've been knocked off your concentration, so,
And
but
are
I
you able
think
to
that,
step back to reflections then, or do you lose it
a little
completely?
bit,
Yeah.
a little bit. And then I just sort of come back and then try and,
Yeah.
but again, I have a friend who say, really likes ICM,
Oh yeah.
intentional camera movement, and he said, if I'm learning intentional camera movement, he said, I'll just go out for a month and shoot nothing but intentional camera movement, and I could never be that disciplined.
Yeah, a month this long. Yeah.
Yeah, I can have like something on this shoulder that says, hey, look out for reflections.
Mhm.
Don't reflect. Don't forget that you're really looking for this. But then on the other side, if something presents itself, then for sure, don't
Yeah.
ignore it. So yeah. So books, I would say are I would say a great way to keep inspired. And yeah, I really love just sitting and absorbing some images, and I prefer the books because I think you can absorb the image more in a book. I
Yeah. You
think it's got,
prefer more than over Instagram, you mean, or?
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
don't get me wrong. I've got to really like somebody to buy the book. I
Yeah.
wouldn't
True.
just buy the book on a whim, really. They've got to really inspire me before I part with the money to buy the book. But it definitely works for me. So
Yeah. It's also, I think, like more interesting because you can, like on Instagram, it's like one photo. Maybe if you go to their profile, but with a book, you can really deep dive into either the person or a specific project that they did or a specific subject. So it gives you more context and
yeah. And then sometimes you can buy a book and you get the book and you think, wow, these are crap. These images, I think these images are
true.
crap.
I have one book which I was really it wasn't street photography, it was wildlife photography, but I saw the photos. I was
Yeah,
like, I just paid for your holiday. These aren't
that's
really like,
right. I just
yeah,
can't believe I've parted with cash for this book. And I'm not going to say the book, but I do have a book that is quite a high profile book.
yes,
And
indeed.
I got it and I thought, oh my, wow,
Yeah,
for me, this is, but of course, it's an emotional thing, and some people will read into those images different things than I will. So,
yeah, and it also, to me, it proves kind of like it's like the worth of a photo kind of is like what you give it worth, first of all, but
mm,
also like even great photographers like, I'm not like let's say like Elliot Erwitt or
mm,
Harry Grijard or whoever, even they made crappy photos, and
yeah,
maybe even they sometimes published those photos or even thought they were good and then maybe backtracked or couldn't see that they were bad. Like it
yeah,
happens. So
yeah.
it's no one is perfect. Even the greats weren't perfect, and I think that's a good
No,
lesson as well.
I agree. And again, maybe, if I revisit the book that I think is poor in 5 years,
Yeah, also true.
maybe I've matured as a photographer and I can see things differently, so.
Yeah,
So, I do think that you do mature, and it's like anything, isn't it? You don't, I tasted a whiskey the other week, and it was, oh, but of course, I never drink whiskey, so
mm,
you don't go straight into the very mature, very distinguished whiskey from not, to 100. So
Exactly. Yeah.
it's a process. You mature, and your palette changes over time, and things. And I think it's the same is true of photography.
True. Yeah. It's funny because I was actually thinking this week about that process a lot, not in photography, but coincidentally it was about it's kind of childish, but about Jurassic Park and Star Wars movies. How as a kid, I used to prefer from the trilogies one movie, but now I have like a different opinion to it. And it's because, like as you say, like you grow, you appreciate different things,
Yeah.
you mature. It's you change as a person.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's like, yeah, is a photo good or bad? Ask again in 5 years. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's right. I agree.
So yeah, great conversation. I think because we've been talking for a while now already, that we'll wrap it up here. I think, yeah, otherwise we'll be continuing for 3 episodes, I think. Maybe as a last one, where can people find you? Where can they find more about your work?
Yeah, so obviously I'm on Instagram, which is at simon.c.ogden, Ogden, and my website is simonogden.co.uk.
Yeah, I'll put them all in the description, of course, so people can easily find them. So yeah, thank you for this conversation. It was really insightful.
Cheers, Frederick. Thanks for having me on.